So here's the deal. I was a mom of two. I'd spent 4 months on bed rest, almost lost my baby girl, and I was a vice president at Foot Cone Belding. This is back in the day. I didn't ask for what I needed. I was absolutely convinced I wouldn't get it. Now, the truth of the matter is I probably wouldn't have. But I can tell you right now, the FCB I know today is not an FCB I would have left. Carter Murray has been rocking the future of way it can be. I am so inspired. I wish he was my boss at the time. He wasn't, but he's here to talk about how he is making change. And I can't thank you enough, Carter, for being here. So please, Carter Murray, everybody.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. Can you all hear me? Sorry about that. So you might be wondering what a white, heterosexual, male, frat boy from Duke University is doing on stage at a 3% conference. So I wanted to give you a little bit of my personal context and my professional context that led me to be here on this stage today. It's always difficult when they put it on both sides. This is my mother with my twin boys, taken about 18 months ago. Sadly, just before my mother passed. Yeah, with my twins. Thing is, she was also a twin. This is her with her brother some 75, 76 years ago. And it was lovely. But you could see the problem beginning at a very early age. You see, that's my mother, the one standing up, looking out, wanting to do something. You see, my mother was one of those people that was born who wanted to do things. She was a creator. And her brother wanted to shoot, play sports. And there's this wonderful story from when they were very young of them picking carrots in a field. And I think this sort of describes the difference between them. And my uncle would be sitting there, he'd pick a carrot, kind of look at it, put it in the basket. Take another carrot, look around, put it in the basket. And my mother would be there at 100 miles an hour, picking the carrots and putting them in the basket. Picking the carrots and putting them in the basket. And that was just how she was. The challenge my mother had is she grew up in a German paternalistic household. She was German. And she was raised that she should get married and have children, and he should inherit the family business. My grandfather started from nothing, created a business that was one of Hugo Boss's biggest competitors in the 1950s and 60s in Germany. And his son was the one who would inherit everything. You see, my sister and I grew up with the collateral damage of that, and also, I would say, some of the greatness of that, because my mother spent her whole life trying to prove to her father that she could do it as well as any man. And then in 1985, my uncle inherited the business, of course. My mother left Germany and tried to carve her own life and her own career, always trying to prove that she was good enough to be able to have her own career, and she could be as successful as any man. In 1986, the family business went bankrupt. My uncle bankrupted the business. And just before, my mother pulled out $100,000, and she created her own business. And over the course of the next 20 years, she became one of the top interior developers and designers in London, some would say the world, working with my stepfather as her partner, and actually released a coffee table book globally about 5 years ago of all her life's work. And I tell you this story because I did this unconscious bias workshop. How many of you have done the unconscious bias workshop in training? It's pretty amazing. And I did it, but there's one online where you hit the buttons as fast as you can, and it tells you what your unconscious bias is. It's actually kind of annoying, but really helpful. And I found out I had this slightly unconscious bias to women over men in the workplace, and I couldn't understand why. And so I had to, of course, go to a coach. I'm now Americanized. Not therapy, a coach, looking forward, but understanding the past. And unpacked why I had this, and I realized it was my mother's story, because when you grow up with that, you realize that for a woman to be able to feel that she has to prove that she has as much right as any man is absolutely bloody wrong. Wrong, profoundly wrong, gets me emotionally upset wrong. And so what was interesting was I was motoring ahead with my career, again, the frat boy from Duke, and I was worried about doing my sports, playing rugby, being with my mates, going out drinking, doing my thing, kind of, right? And I was worried about my career. I wanted to, advance at some point. And then I became a CEO. And I have to tell you, if you're a CEO and you listen for 20% of the time, you can't but become a different person. The stories that I heard horrified me. And I don't think, and this is what worries me a little bit, is we all think this is in the past, and it's not. Well, men. Talk about men for a second. You're all like, what are you talking about, Carter? We know it's not in the past. So I just want to share with you two very quick anonymous stories on this that really show how profound the problem is. The first one is an anonymous executive who works with me. She's one of the top executives in our company, in one of our offices in North America. And she had an experience where she was working with another company last year. And someone sent her an email. You know what the title of the email from the man was? Girl! Exclamation mark. Followed by paragraphs and paragraphs of abuse. And of course, I found out about this about 4 months later, and I realized that her body language, how she was, she'd really lost her self-confidence. And she came in my office, and we talked about it. And I have to tell you, that's just wrong. Unfortunately, it was and I have to tell you, it wasn't our company, and it wasn't a sister company, it was another company, and no one had taken action. No one had taken action. And it's not just the top executives. I then went, how many of you know about Year Up? Year Up is an unbelievable program that takes people from poorer backgrounds, really sometimes tough neighborhoods who'd never had the chance to go to university. And it gives them a one-year program to train them to get into the corporate world. So I went to talk there, and there was this lovely, smart, clearly put together African-American lady who stood up shaking like a leaf when we went to question and story time. She told the story how her family told her that she was wasting her time going to Year Up, and she persevered and fought to go. She went there, she got trained, and then she went and interned in a holding company, in data analytics, in an agency and a holding company. And when she was in that job, imagine, surrounded, by the way, by white people, in a completely different environment. She sat there and her boss came up to her and said, you should just, this by the way, was at the end of last year. You should just stop trying to be so cute. I think it's funny that you're cute and bringing your cuteness into work, but we think you should, try and do something else, will you? And walked away. And this lady who had taken herself through her career, early on through her life to try and build a career, was shaking like a leaf and lost her self-confidence. Right? So people that think that this is fixed are wrong. And I think the men have to stand up as much as the women. And I want to give you the professional context more on this. And this is not me being political, I promise. Right? I am just using this because it's a really good example of what goes wrong in the C-suite and in boardrooms. And the reason this is so scary, when Ferguson happened, I was outraged, and I thought, I'm a global CEO, I'm going to put a stake in the ground and stand for something. So I wrote this irate letter, and I walked into Cindy Augustine, who's African-American head of it, who happens to be African-American, who's our global head of HR, who's awesome. And I gave her this letter and said, what do you think? Shall we publish it? And she said, you can't publish it. And I went, why? Am I going to piss off? I don't care if I piss off that extreme right. Not Republicans, but like those racist, awful people. And she said, no, you're going to piss off the African-American community. I was like, what? Why? She goes, because they're going to look at you and go, how did you not know? Were you blind? Were you blind? And that evening she sent me an email, which unfortunately she will never let me share, which is really annoying, talking about what it was like as an African-American woman to grow up in this country and what she faces every day when she walks to work, what her children face, and what she faces in management and the little biases every day that she faces. And so this is why this is dangerous. And I thought, given that I come from account management, a nice corporate PowerPoint chart would be helpful. We've got one in there. We can all have discussions about Republican, Democrat, but there is one truth in America that no one can run away from, which is this is the distribution of 18-year-olds today. If you're under 18 and you're Caucasian, you are no longer the majority in the United States. And no amount of anger and words is going to change that. And here's the other issue, is that if you divide that white population in half, and you're in a C-suite, and you're surrounded by white, normally men, or the boardroom, how can we say in a creative business where we're trying to represent the people we're marketing to, that we're trying to really fuel our creativity? I think that rather nicely illustrates that that is absolutely ridiculous. So the change has to happen, and I think, I have to say, FCB, as much as anyone, we're not there yet. We have a ton of work to do, so I don't want you to think I'm talking from on high. We have to work on this as much as anyone else. So, this is the problem. This is the last semi-political image, but it's just, sometimes you're given a gift when you're talking about diversity, and this happens to be it. It's an echo chamber. This is a complete and total echo chamber in which we are living. If we are a CEO, I was at a conference and the lady said, what do I do? I'm the head of diversity. What do you recommend I do? I said, well, how many women are on the leadership team that you're on? She goes, I'm the only one. I said, well, you have to leave if your CEO doesn't commit to fixing that, because no amount of training or tools is going to fix a fundamental problem. And so this is the issue which we face as CEOs. And I hope the male CEOs who are in the room at least feel that as much as I do. We have a really hard job. We never get the right information. I've made one or two really bad decisions. Even last month, I made a terrible decision. I didn't have all the data points. I got a data point when I was on the West Coast last week on something I made a decision on, and now and it profoundly affected me. The way you make smart decisions is by getting as diverse a group of people together so that you can get different opinions in a room and then make a smart decision. This does not allow you to do that, because this is what happens. I don't know how many of you know this. Okay, there was one more, but this one isn't really, because it's Instagram. So do you realize, all of you look at this photo and see if you can spot what's wrong with this photograph? What happens is you start speaking to yourself, right? I can sit, most CEOs, we have lovely offices. We can just sit there and start thinking, when we surround ourselves with people like us, that all we're doing is hearing our own opinions. So me too, I have to talk about this, it's topical, because I was in one of our offices in North America recently, and I had an afternoon with all the different levels of the agency, just little breakout groups. And I asked every woman, I said, is it okay if I ask you, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, but if you could post Me Too on Facebook, if you could post that, does that apply to you? And guess what percentage said yes? You see, that's what happens when you present to women. 100%. 100%. And as a man, I would have guessed 50 or 60. 100%. And the stories that I heard shamed me, humbled me, and horrified me all at the same time, because I had not seen it. Going back to the Ferguson, going back to that story, I had not seen it. And so I think, step one of this whole conversation is to be open that there is a problem and that we as men have to fix it as much as women. And I do think it starts with leadership. So this is me with Susan, who's sitting right here, which I'm really chuffed about, an absolute rock star. And this is Nigel, who's our Chief Strategy Officer, used to be a chess player until he worked out he couldn't be a grandmaster and went into advertising, that type of planner. And we feel passionately about this topic, and that's us getting emotional after our global leadership meeting. But I do think it starts at the very, very top, and we have to be accountable at the top of the company. And once you take that seriously, then it's easy to promote the brilliant women from within, to bring in brilliant women. And these are all the people that are in leadership positions. Well, not all, actually. We couldn't fit them all on the slide. But this is many of the leaders that we have in our company around the world today. And I think they are now making sure that below them, they are getting the right balance. So you have to get it at every level. But it always, always has to start at the top. And all of us have to hold the CEOs and the leadership teams accountable. And then you get people like this, Cindy, who I talked about, who... Yes, she's Black Enterprise's most powerful, one of the most powerful women in business, but she's also an incredible human being. She's an HR person with a heart who understands this topic and really tries to do right by people. Dana Mayman, So this is the other thing. You know, Dana's like, you know, Carter, this whole work-life balance thing, I can't really talk about it too much because she's amazing. She took a $35 million business with 80 employees and turned it into a $350 million healthcare business. $350 million. She's actually one of the most successful business people in our industry, right? And she did it through blood, sweat, tears, and talent. And then our very own Susan, who I've talked about as well. So how many of you know about Free the Bid? Cool. So those of you that don't, those of you that do, I want to tell you the story behind it, because that explains to you, when people say, yeah, but, and I get this, I don't mean I get it, I mean, I get people that tell me this, which is total rubbish. Oh, but Carter, it's about the talent. You know, and someone in England recently wrote about, I'm getting tired of diversity instead of talent. I mean, what garbage. And I want to explain to you some institutionalized misogyny that we need to fix, that is, you know what makes it even worse? It's unintentional, which makes it sound like an oxymoron. I'm getting lost in my own words here. So here's the story behind Free the Bid. You have to understand that we have to break the cycle. So if you're, let's say, a car company, and you're the CMO, and you have a $2 million pitch, you go to your agency and say, we're going to do 3 bid on directors, but I want I'm spending $2 million. My career's on the line, the car business is on the line, I've got to get this right. So when you bring me the 3 directors, please make sure that they have a big creative book of having done lots of $3 million shoots. Otherwise, I'm not going to risk it. So what does the agency do? They quite rightly go to the top 10 directors in the car business. I'm using car as an example. I might be wrong on 1 or 2, and guess what? Historically, the top 10 directors are men. And the top 10 directors with $3 million shoots in the book are men. So when you 3 bid, it's all men. Not because the production department are trying to freeze women out of advertising, but because everyone with good intentions wants to be warm and safe and fuzzy about their $2 million spend. So with Free the Bid, you have to break the cycle. And to say, look, out of every 3 bid, every time we do a 3 bid, 1 will be a female director is not a huge ask. And I'm proud to say in 12 months, I think, Susan, we've done 98% of our bids in America have been in the 3 bid. The two or three times we couldn't was because it was with an alliance that didn't want to participate. And over 30% of the jobs went to female directors. The reason I'm telling you this story and take a bit of time of it, it's important to be able to have the stories to explain to people that there are structural things that are making this wrong and making it hard to fix it and to fix it fast. I've talked about unconscious bias, and I don't want to ruin the workshop, but I'm going to for all of those of you who haven't been. Is that all right? I can do that, right? So, you know, when you put a resume with very educated, very, hopefully open, positive people, and you break it into 4 tables, and you give everyone a resume, and you say, how likely are you to hire them out of 100 points? And afterwards, it happens in every exercise, anywhere in the world, you have, the 4 tables have different scores, 90 out of 100, 70 out of 100, 50 out of 100. And of course, you find out at the end, the trick, which is, it's the same resume. The only difference is the name and the picture. And the white Catholic male gets normally 90 to 95 out of 100, and the Muslim lady gets the lowest score with the same profile. And so I think, you know, just being open and listening is so incredibly important for us all to acknowledge that there's things that we have to get right. And in understanding ourselves, we'll be much better at working out how we can help others. And so this is something that is hugely important. Okay, this blew my mind. So I was on a panel. You can tell this really is nuts. So I was on a panel with a professor from Boulder, and she shared this stat. So if you're interviewing 4 people and there's 1 woman, what are the odds of her getting hired? Is that Haida? Thank you, Haida. When you're the head of diversity at IPG, that's a cheat to shout out that answer. But yeah, 0. Close to 0. You're not allowed to answer this one, Haida. If you have 2 women in a pool of 4, what's the odds of a woman getting hired? 50%. Just absorb that. That's crazy. Like when someone opens your eyes to that statistic as a CEO or a recruiter, how can you not change how you recruit? And then here's the other thing that's even crazier. As you add a person, from what I understood from what she said, as you add a person, so when you go to a pool of 5 and you still only have 2 women, still 50%. Then the odds go in your favor. 6 people, still 50%. But this thing about, oh, well, we're going to put a woman into the mix. You're like, don't bother. That's ridiculous. So you need to have a fair representation in the pool. I'm trying to do a study on this to see if it's the same when you talk about people of color, right? Does it really change if you put 2 into the mix? And that's a study that I want us to start exploring too, because it should hold true. So, as you can see, I feel quite strongly on the topic. And I showed up, and Susan, after about working with me for a month, she goes, Carter, please will you start? I was like, you're not enough of a feminist, Susan. You've really got to step up a bit more. And Susan was there chuckling at me going, Carter, I mean, I get we need to fix things. But can we just celebrate the brilliant women who have broken through? And there are some brilliant women who have broken through before me. I'm doing okay. You're doing bloody amazing, by the way. And can we celebrate the brilliant women? So when we did a global meeting in South Africa, we had this panel. And instead of it being, where are the women? We did, here are the women. Because actually one thing that was nice, and I think a great thing, was that 47 out of our 100 top executives who were there were women. And again, for me, it was just eye-opening. You have to understand, this is the other thing I think we all have to push it. We need to have our eyes opened as men. We have to want to listen, but we also need to have our eyes open. And just listening to this panel opened my eyes. You know, there was a woman, by the way, Swati, the first ever female CCO of a top agency in India. We have Joanna, who's in the middle, who's the only female CCO of a top 10 network in Brazil. I mean, I can go on and on. Oh, and Tina, and Josephine and Julie, but Tina runs the #1 shopper marketing agency in the US. I mean, this goes on. These are not, one thing I've learned from women, listening to the women who work with me, is there's nothing more insulting to women than having a token woman in a position. They're like, I'd rather have no woman than a token woman. I want you to hire brilliant women who can inspire everyone, who earned their place there. And all these people were that. But so listening to them was just, so one of them, I can't remember who it was saying, you know, I used to go to global network meetings and there were 5 women out of 100. And I'd be like, okay, this is normal. And then I went to one meeting where there were 10 out of 100. And I went, wow, look at all the women here. And I was sitting in the audience going, really? 10 women out of 100 is a lot? And they were like, yes, that was great. And then now there were 47 out of 100. And I can tell you the whole dynamic of the meeting changed. The creativity, the discussion, the energy by having that diversity. Diversity is not just something which, you know, we have to tick. In fact, again, going back to the whole token thing, it's what mustn't happen. Diversity drives creativity. It's a personal belief that Susan and Nigel and I have, that it fuels creativity as well as being the right thing to do. And so I want to share with you, because this is advertising, we run an ad agency, we believe in this very strongly and we want this to come through in our work. So we did this campaign in the UK that got a lot of creative recognition called This Girl Can, which we're very proud of. It was for the UK government to get women back into exercise. And this caused a phenomenon. We launched it. It got tens, if not hundreds of thousands of women back into exercise. And we had to do a follow-up. And you'll see why I like this ad, because there was a rather lovely voiceover to this ad, which of course in England nobody could recognize, but if you don't in this audience, I'd be really disappointed. And I think we have to celebrate the brilliant women, and so that's what we try and do in our advertising too.
2 million fewer women are playing sport regularly. That's compared to men. Despite this, 75% of 14 to 40-year-old women say they want to be more active. So, what is putting them off?
Well, lots of things actually, all with one common theme: the fear of being judged. So how could Sport England inspire women to give judgment the finger and give exercise another go?
Let's go!
We showed that healthy bodies aren't always ripped bodies. We celebrated cellulite, jiggled the jiggly bits and soaked the screen with sweat. Poster sites featured women in all their unphotoshopped glory. Seeded content told real stories of the personal barriers they'd overcome. And a social media algorithm found women expressing exercise anxieties so we could reply with words of support. It's fair to say the word got out.
This campaign is genius. That is so empowering.
It's called This Girl Can.
And the message is, if this girl can, anyone can.
My reaction was, finally something that empowers everyone.
And women everywhere were inspired to put their fears behind them and become girls who can.
And it's just a really fun, amazing, uplifting advert that really gets me going in the morning.
I'm knackered.
And so I want to close with this ad. Thank you. So this is the ad I was talking about.
3, 2, 1, ready?
Right. Many people wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. When I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. But I say, I'm a woman. Phenomenally. It's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. It's the fire in my eyes, the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist, the joy in my feet. Because I'm a woman. Phenomenally. Phenomenal woman. It ought to make you proud. That's my mother and my grandmothers and my great-grandmothers and your greats and my great-greats and all you women and me.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. So, it's been a journey being a CEO, let me tell you, and I'm still learning every day, and it's really hard to get this whole topic right. But I think it's not just about gender equality. I also think it's about people of color and the LGBTQ community. I've sort of come up with this framework, and it's probably totally wrong, but there we go. That's how I think about it, which is, step one is for all of us to be brave enough to be open to say, this isn't right, and there is a problem out there in 2017, and we need to get it right. And let's listen, and let's try and be open about it together. The second part for me, underneath that, there's two parts. One is the structural part, which is we've got to fix things. There are things like the free the bid that we've got to get right, and hiring and how we do it. And then there's the other piece under it, which is we must celebrate the brilliant people that have broken through and acknowledge them and put them high on a pedestal and acknowledge how they've done. And that's really why I'm on stage too. I'm here in honor of my mother and my sister, who's in the audience here today. Thank you very much.
FCB's hiring. Wow, right? Don't we want to all be working for men and women who think like that? Let's make that the future.